Prime time opportunity as we approach the 2022 NFL Draft for these teams picking in the top 10 to improve their teams and keep them out of the top 10 in future drafts. Jets and Giants both with big time opportunities, 2 picks each in the top 10. And with that, let's have a little draft conversation here. Rhett Lewis alongside our lead NFL draft analyst and former NFL scout Daniel Jeremiah. DJ, let's start this thing by looking back at the rookie class we had last year, right? We saw 3 All-Pros out of that class. We saw 4 Pro Bowlers. I mean, those top 15 picks, premier players and record setters in a lot of cases. So overall, how does this coming year's draft class compare to what we saw a year ago?
I don't think it has that top line, top of the ticket talent that we saw last year. When you talk about guys like Micah Parsons, you look at Jamar Chase, you look at Kyle Pitts, Rashawn Slater, these guys are already arguably the best players of their position, or at least in the conversation as rookies. I don't think that's going to be the case with this class, but what we do have is we have a lot of depth. So if you're a team that's got a lot of picks between 15 and 60, man, you're going to love this draft because that's where the real special part of this draft exists. Value
right there. We'll get into that here a little bit coming up. Let's start with depth at position groups as you're talking about. Top-end talent and depth, which position group is the best as you've evaluated thus far?
Well, I feel like it's a broken record, Rhett. It's just a receiver position. It's once again, I feel like this is the case each and every year. The college game is just giving us these wideouts. And this is a situation in this draft where I've got 7 guys so far that I've graded that I have first-round grades on.
7?
So, that just speaks to the quality. I don't know that all 7 of those guys make it into round 1, but we've seen it over the last few years. Look at the talent that we've seen in the second round of the draft. I mean, watch the playoffs. You'll see them on just about every single team, stud second-round wide receivers. That's going to be the case again this year.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago we were talking about, upwards of 30 guys with day 1, day 2 type draft grades, and then we saw it again last year with all those guys that went in the top 10, Waddle, Chase, Devontae Smith up there. Is this a product of the type of offenses that we're seeing run at the college level that are giving us these high-end receivers in bulk?
Well, it's every school in the country is throwing the ball, and they're spreading people out, and they're playing with 4 and 5 wideouts. So it's just a numbers game. And I think you can trace it all the way back to 7-on-7 exploding at the high school level, and the high school teams running the spread offense and throwing it all over the yard. I remember growing up, when I grew up playing the 90s in high school football, we were like one of the only teams in the county that threw the football. And so it was great, by the way. It allowed me to break a lot of records. None of them exist any longer because everybody is chucking the football. So I think this is going to be a yearly thing, which is going to lead to some draft strategy where you'll look and say, man, we have a higher grade on this wide receiver than maybe this linebacker or this corner. But just the volume of wideouts, and we can get quality in rounds 2, 3, and beyond.
That's a great point, and really interesting to see those wideouts come off the board in this year's draft. But with every strength, we do have weaknesses. So if there is a group that is not as strong as we saw in years past, what position group rings that bell for you?
Well, to me, it's the most important one. It's the quarterback position. I don't think we have those top-end guys that we've had in years past. Now, last year, look, all those guys were heralded. A bunch of them struggled as rookies on bad football teams. I look at this group this year. Kenny Pickett so far is my top guy, but I don't have a top 10 type grade on any of the quarterbacks in this class. So there's some intriguing guys. There's some lottery ticket type players, Rhett, but man, I don't know there's a sure thing at the quarterback position in this draft.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And we saw 5 go in the first 15 picks last year in terms of quarterbacks. It feels like the value, as you were mentioning at the top here, for the quarterbacks might start at 15 and be in that 15 to 25 or 15 to 30 range. And that could actually be a benefit to some of these quarterbacks, right?
Yeah, you go to better teams. I mean, you think back to, Lamar Jackson's a great example. The guy's already pocketed an MVP, but got a chance to go to an established organization at the back end of the first round where they could put the pieces around him to help him be successful. And obviously, he did his part and contributed in a major way, but he went to a better football team. You look back at when Deshaun Watson came into the league, Patrick Mahomes, these guys went to better football teams. We've seen it this last year. You go to a team that's picking 1 or 2, it is extremely hard to get that thing flipped around in short manner. The exception, Joe Burrow. Somehow Joe Burrow and that group that they assimilated there with him, following that up with Jamar Chase the following year, they got it flipped pretty quick. But for the rest of us, it's a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, it's a real lesson in drafting. I mean, the Bengals have done it just phenomenally well these last 2 years with picking at the top of each round. That year they got Burrow, and then this past year as well with Jamar Chase. Okay, so Trevor Lawrence was your top quarterback and your top overall player last year. As you begin to formalize your top 50 list for this year's prospects, who's at the top right now?
Well, for me, it's Aiden Hutchinson at Michigan. And look, I say that. I don't put him in the same class as the Bosa brothers who came out, or even Chase Young from Ohio State. This guy, though, his floor is extremely high. He's going to be a consistent, in my opinion, 8 to 12 sack guy. I don't know he's ever going to post the 15, 16, 18 sacks at the NFL level, but he never stops. His motor's relentless. He can beat you with speed. He can beat you with power. To me, he's just a rock-solid player. I think you're going to be very happy with him in this draft class. Not necessarily Myles Garrett,
right,
but somebody I think if you're picking up there at the top of the draft, it's a very safe pick, Rhett. To me, he's one of the highest floor picks that we've seen come into the league the last few years.
Jaguars sitting there at number 1, back-to-back years here, have a chance to take your top overall player in back-to-back years. And you want to talk about changing culture, Trevor Lawrence on offense, Aiden Hutchinson on defense. That would be a step in the right direction for the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right, with every class, we get those players that have analysts and oftentimes evaluators and coaches sit on both sides of the fence here, those polarizing prospects. Who fits that bill for you this year?
Well, we just talked about Aiden Hutchinson being my top player. If you want to go to the most polarizing player, all you got to do is just go a couple bodies over on that defensive line to David Ajabo, coming off the edge for Michigan. He does not have a long history of playing the sport, so he's very raw, but you can see the skills you can dream on going forward. He's got some sack production. He's got big-time burst coming off the edge. I think he bends at the top of his rush a little bit better than Hutchinson does. But just some of the instinct stuff is not there. He struggles against the run. They take him off the field a good bit in those obvious running situations. So that's when you talk to teams. Some teams kind of see it, man, this is a risk here. We don't know exactly what we're buying, and I don't know if I feel comfortable in the first round with this player. You talk to another team and like, man, this guy to me with the traits that he possesses is a top 10, top 15 pick in any draft because you can really build off the skills that he possesses. He's not a finished product. Some people look at that as a good thing. Some people look at that as a bad thing.
Yeah, I think we had those conversations with Jason Owe or with Odafe Owe last year out of Penn State, right? With that supreme athleticism, maybe a little bit raw, and kind of saw some of those flashes this year for the Ravens as one of their 2 first-round picks from this past year's draft. And look, the Big Ten is putting out edge rushers now. George Karlaftis from Purdue will be up there in the first round, very high as well. Another interesting player there. So the edge rusher market is pretty deep this year in terms of that high-end talent. Let's move on to the a mock draft season really starting in earnest for you on Friday. Your first one of your favorite things coming out here on NFL.com. You got any little teasers that you can hand out to us that we could expect to see from this mock draft 1.0?
Well, I know the way you're sarcastically presenting this, though. I will say, early on, when I made the leap from teams over to the media side, mock drafts, and I would read the comments, and I would go, oh, this is the worst. And then I got to really appreciate it and just enjoy it. To me, it is a fun exercise where you're trying to guess where these guys are going to go. You're talking to buddies around the league, and it changes as you go through the process. I will just say, in having peeked at a couple mock drafts that are out there, I think there'll be a little bit of a surprise with maybe a player that others have kind of just rubber stamped as a top 3 pick, top 5 pick. I might not have him there. So we'll see when this one comes out. I'm sure there'll be some very shocked and maybe even some upset folks out there. We'll see.
Okay. All right. That is definitely something to watch for. I do like the distinction you're making there. When you first started, anxiety over the mentions. Now you just love seeing the mentions light up, and you just throw them right into the fire.
It's fun.
That's big time. All right. That's our lead NFL draft analyst, Daniel Jeremiah. I'm Rhett Lewis. We'll catch you next time here as we continue our draft conversations leading up to Vegas